As a great American philosopher, Jay-Z once said, it was all good just a week ago. Ben Cruz is here with me. Brian is getting ready for a move. He's staying in San Francisco, but he's not going to be as close to Chase anymore, which I'm sad about because I just go park at his place and walk to the building. But Ben Cruz from The Ringer, what's up, man?
Not much, Double G. I'll be honest. I thought you were inviting me onto the wrestling show based on last night's happening. So I had all this. Is Draymond's chokehold better than Taz's Tazmission takes loaded? But I guess we're here to talk.
We'll go into that as well because you showed me an article by Chuck Mindenhall, UFC writer, MMA writer, he wrote an article that was tongue in cheek about Draymond's his lack of jiu-jitsu experience in the chokehold against Rudy Gobert, which to me should work against him. Like if anybody in the NBA executive offices who doles out the punishment understands how light that choke was, there's so much space between Draymond's inner arm and Rudy's neck. You knew that it wasn't an actual choke. It was like a come over here, get off of my guy.
Based on how some of the Draymond haters and Rudy Gobert is acting, he had that thing locked in. You know, he had his fingers were interlocking. He had what a ridiculous response by Rudy. By the way, I get it. You know, Rudy also was about to choke slam Clay through a table. You know what I mean? So Draymond responded, and he's gonna get suspended in some capacity. I'm sure we'll get into it, but it's all ridiculous. This is all a ridiculous situation.
The thing about Draymond's is his reputation is going to probably add more to this punishment because we know that he doesn't like Rudy, but take a ticket. Like the rest of the NBA don't like Rudy either. Like that's a thing with him for whatever reason, you know, whether or not it's the patient zero COVID thing that we always kind of joke about but they make fun of this guy all the time. And yet he's a tremendous defensive player, but it just seems like I kind of wonder what a lot of the players think about, what's going to happen.
It's funny you bring that up too, because I was curious as well, given kind of Rudy's reputation in that, I don't know how many of his peers exactly are big fans of him specifically. And I saw a clip from Pat Bev's podcast where they were recording as it happened.
Oh, wow.
And Pat Bev kind of wasn't exactly in defense of what Draymond did. He got more on Cat and not getting on Cat for not getting involved in the scrap. And defending Rudy a little bit more. But in the Evan Turners of the world, he kind of put a little thing out there on Twitter too. It was just like, I don't know. I am curious to see what a lot of the current players think about that, because I thought I'd see a lot more. Oh my God, Draymond's on his BS again. I honestly didn't see a lot of it, and maybe I should search for it more. But it was
when is Inside the NBA? When are they?
So they ran last night. They ran last night too. On their they were on their Tuesday tip, and Shaq and Chuck made fun of the situation a little bit. Shaq put Chuck in a chokehold, and they go again tomorrow. So I'm sure they'll talk about it then. But it's for what's funny too is all this talk about today's NBA being super soft. And, this is what the 80s and 90s hoop was like, and basically what Draymond did last night was a regular occurrence during those days. And now all of these people are on this pedestal of, Draymond needs to be kicked out of the league.
Yeah. Okay. So let's actually break down the play. And believe me, this will not be the only topic. There's a lot of stuff. This is a great topic for a podcast because we don't have to talk about how poor the Warriors have played in these last 4 games as much as we can talk about.
We can get into that. Yeah.
Well, we'll get into that in a little bit, but this makes it a little bit more fun. Okay. So the situation actually starts with McDaniels and Clay.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched the game a little late. I was probably about a half an hour behind the live feed. So when I saw your text, I don't think you even texted. It was some other people texting me, but then when I got caught up, I texted you guys, and just it was like halftime, I think. So I saw. Now this goes back to the other day. Minnesota punked the Warriors in Chase just a couple days ago with Steph, and Draymond both playing. Right. So There was a little bit of an air of superiority for these best record in the West T-Wolves, and I sensed that from the beginning. So Steph is out of the game. Steph has a knee strain, and so McDaniels goes to Klay, and so Klay brings the ball up, and it's one of those bringing the ball up where he's like pushing McDaniels off of him because McDaniels is guarding him so tightly, as if McDaniels is saying like, "You're not Steph, bro. Like I'm take this basketball from you." So Klay was like kind of took offense to that. Was like pushing him, and I was like surprised he didn't get offensive foul. So that happens. Then they go for a rebound. Klay in his box out pushes his hand out, grabs a hold of the jersey. He let go. He didn't hold it for that long. He let go. And then as they were jogging back down court, McDaniels then grabbed his jersey, then Klay grabbed his jersey again, and then they were in this like little tug of war thing. To me, this was a little bit reminiscent of last year when Devin Booker came into Chase and was just punking Klay left and right, and probably know about it. And this is what's going to happen. This happens with older players who, Klay is having a terrible, terrible start to the season. You got these young cats who are coming up, and they're going to let him know about it when they can handle him. And so I don't think he was the instigator in this sense. I do think McDaniels was the instigator. I think Klay made a mistake. He didn't really mean to grab
in retaliating. Yeah.
But it was the box out, right? It was the box out. He knows that the dude is athletic. He knows that this dude is an all-world defender. So he's just trying to win his matchup, probably knowing that it wasn't going to go well at the same time. Now, they get in the tug-of-war thing. So now I want to show you this picture. Now, for the folks watching on YouTube, this is not the greatest picture because it's a screen grab, and I haven't seen an actual good photo of this yet. But this is what you were talking about early. So Rudy Gobert, the peacemaker, Rudy Gobert, he does this to Klay. So he puts his bicep in the back of Klay's head, and he puts his forearm kind of near Klay's chin, and he pulls Klay off. Now, I don't know if that was necessary. It looked like both guys were trying to get away from each other at that point. And Rudy decided, he's got to try and split this thing up. I thought it was actually going to be split up already. I don't think either guy wanted to really keep that thing going. Once you hear the whistles, they were just like, just let go of my jersey, bro. So Rudy does that. And then it was almost like a bee that smelled honey, or the nectar of a flower. Draymond sees that, and he's like, "Oh, it's an eye for an eye." Now, Draymond's choke, which I'll show here. Thankfully, Jordan Jimenez, J Squared, he actually is the only one that I've seen that actually has a good photograph of it. Everything else is screen grabs on Twitter. So shout out to J Squared for his photo. And you get a really good view of Draymond grabbing Gobert underneath the chin and pulling him backward and down. And so Pat Bev is frustrated with Cat. Gobert was just going to be dragged by Draymond. Like, what was he doing? Like, he must have been shocked because there was no fight back there. He was just like, "Oh, I'm getting dragged by this man who's half my size, and I'm just gonna go with him." Because at first, he has his hands up, and he's just like, I think he's looking at the refs, and the refs are like, "Bro, like, what do you want us to call? The play's over." like, what do you?
Yeah,
we can't blow the whistle again. Like, what are you asking us to do? Get out of this thing. And so finally, people pulled Draymond off. Cat tried to sneak behind Draymond, and he kind of put his arm around Draymond. But Draymond like fought the choke by putting his chin in his chest, so Cat couldn't get his arm underneath Draymond's chin. And I think Ant Edwards grabbed Draymond's arm or something, and then they finally separated. Now, Draymond and Ant had their own little shindig the other night where they kind of got into it, and Ant basically told Draymond, no one's scared of you or whatever. So all of those things, I think the reason why this happened, more so than anything else, is the Warriors got punked in Chase just a couple of days ago. I think that's the reason why this thing kind of got a little bit out of control, because you have the team who did the punking, who's coming out on the court just, with some swagger, And then you have the team without their best player who are, just 2 years ago defending champions are like, we got to set this tone because if these guys come out here and we play the same way, this thing could get away from us quickly. I think all of those are involved into what happened. But the only thing that I think the NBA offices are going to care about is the actual choke. So here's my question to you. What is Draymond's suspension going to be here? And does the league retroactively go back and say, we screwed up, Rudy should have been punished as well?
I mean, I've seen 1 game suspension for Draymond, and I've seen 10, right?
Was that Jay Williams saying 10?
Yeah, Jay Williams, but I think Jay Williams also has some ulterior motives when it comes to the Warriors and Draymond. I'm going to split the difference here, and I think it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 games.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because of the choke itself. I think it's going to be the rationale is going to be closer to what they've done in the past when it comes to punishing Draymond, which is, his behavior from the past, right? Like his history, his reputation, right? So I think it's going to fall somewhere in the 5-game range. And in terms of will the league punish Rudy, at most a game, he might catch a fine, a retroactive technical, because apparently you can do that too. If you look back at what they did to Draymond the other night, so against the Cavs, I should say. But again, it's all so. The only word I can think of is silly, right? It's so dumb how this all unfolded, and you're right in that Clay and McDaniels got tied up. The jersey pulling, and Clay's jersey was ripped, which was a whole other, a little shocking, but that might have just been, within the tussling. And that was probably going to de-escalate sooner than later. I mean, Klay Thompson and Jaden McDaniels are 2 of the most mild-mannered dudes in the league. And neither of them were trying to get kicked out. And it obviously escalated. It escalated at the point that Rudy got involved, which is why the peacemaker thing was strange to me, that they labeled it so quickly too. They obviously reviewed the film and they reviewed the tape, and that's what they came away with, because I think it would have dissolved, a double technical situation, because I think in that in Anthony Slater's piece, he talked about talking to the refs in the pool after the game, and that was one of the options that they had floated to each other, that they had floated for Clay and McDaniels, which was, we'll just double tech them both up and keep it moving. But since it lingered and it escalated into what it escalated to, the ejections happened. So I mean, with the Draymond stuff, I'm assuming a multi-game suspension. And then with the Rudy thing, I think the way that he's almost preemptively gone to the media and claimed his life was threatened, like he was Tony Khan in the CM Punk situation. I think they're going to be a little bit more generous with how they kind of treat it.
So I go back every time something happens like this with Draymond. I go back to the 2016 finals, because how can you not, right? Warriors are about to go up 3-1, then and then LeBron steps over Draymond, and Draymond kind of shoots his arm up towards LeBron's groin, and it's like, okay, is that the punishment, which was Draymond having to get suspended? Was that because of the crime, or was that because of the previous crimes? Because he had also done a lot of kicking towards the groin.
Steven Adams situation.
Steven Adams. So that is what I go back to. So I always lean towards Draymond getting more of a punishment than probably what it should be, because they're also basing prior crimes when it comes to it. Mm-hmm. And I think at first, like last night when I was thinking about this, I was like, okay, he'll get suspended for 2 games and then we'll keep it moving. And then that's actually good for him, because he's still coming off of this ankle injury. He himself doesn't feel like he's 100% back yet. That'll just be rest, and he'll be fine. He was going to miss those 2 games at some point anyway during the season, just based off of rest. And now you said what you said at 5. I'm actually probably leaning a little bit closer to what you said. If it's beyond 5, though, this is a level of ridiculousness that is I don't know. It's you know, every league is hypocritical when it comes to this stuff. The NFL has specific rules where everybody, you know, on the field except for the quarterback can get tackled in a certain way, right? So,
Yeah.
but I just sense that if it is more than what we believe, then it's just really silly. And you know, I do think that Rudy does deserve something for instigating the situation. If Rudy doesn't grab Clay by the neck, then Draymond doesn't do what he did. And it's like Barry Bonds on steroids. Big Mac and Sammy Sosa were on steroids first. Barry Bonds was just better than both of them on steroids. It's like, you know, sorry that Draymond is better at sticking up for his guy than you are. But again, it's Draymond, so it's going to be there. I think they're going to lean heavier. But what do you, if it's more than 5 games, what are you thinking?
If it's more than 5, I think it's going to go to 10. Like it's just going to be on that end of the spectrum, because again, the history is hard to debate, right? Like it exists. So with that, they can use that as kind of evidence for why they're going to go in that direction. And again, I think the the fact that he kind of ragdolled Rudy a little bit down the court is going to be like they're going to set a timer to see how long this actual chokehold took place, and I think that's going to be it. So if it's not 5 or anything a little bit less than that, I think it's going to be in the double digits, which is kind of unfortunate, especially given that, you know, they instituted this in-season tournament and this group play thing, so that the players would care more, even though that whole concept is a little bit ridiculous to me. I think we have some of the most competitive players in the NBA, and then they need extra incentive. Anyway, they got what they wanted, right? The league got what they wanted. They got a bunch of dudes who care about winning this game. So maybe a little too much, right? You know, ripping jerseys and choking your opponent probably isn't what they were thinking when they came up with this idea. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how they handle the situation. But I mean, you and I have kind of seen how they've handled this stuff with Draymond in the past, and I think it's going to be more severe than we're actually thinking. I think we're probably being a little bit too rational right now, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, and you know, we're being rational. Also, we're Warriors fans. We're Draymond fans. We've seen everything that he's ever done. Here's a bigger picture thing that I'm a little worried about. And Brian and I talked about this last year when the Phoenix situation happened, where they just blew the Warriors off their home court. You know, the history of the NBA says that you have this dynasty, and eventually the dynasty's over, and you kind of set up the next team. Like you think about you know, the Celtics and the Lakers. The Lakers finally overcame them, and the Celtics were sort of the setup for the Pistons to come on. The Pistons had to go through the Celtics in order to be the Pistons, the champions that they were. Chicago Bulls had to go through not only the Pistons, but also Magic Johnson and the Lakers to become who they were. You know, we got that championship 2 years ago, which was, I think, a little bit of a surprise. And so it gave that dynasty a little bit more life. And I really wonder if this year's team and what we've seen two different plans, two different strategy attacks in the last 2 years. Last year and the year before was young draft picks. We got to get these young guys, some playing time. We got to build around these young guys. And if you're a vet, you're like, we got Steph, man. Like, we need to actually maximize his career. We have a window. We need to just press the gas pedal and you know, bring in a team that can win the title again. And this year, they kind of did that a little bit, right? You bring in Chris Paul, you bring in Saric, you let go of a James Wiseman, you let go of a Ryan Rollins, and who's Patrick
Baldwin
Jr. And you go, okay, like, yeah, you know, maybe last year we thought a little bit differently about this, and so you bring in and then you draft two rookies who are older, who are not, you know, 19 years old. So it was like a flip to the other page. But I think what we're also seeing is the athleticism on this team is almost non-existent. Like Andrew Wiggins, he is a shadow of himself right now. And I thought, even though I don't think he played well against the Timberwolves last night, there were signs of things that he was doing to where you're like, okay, this brother is really trying hard to get out.
He
of
was
this
active,
funk.
much more active last night.
But again, every time he gets the ball and he's got a pump fake, the ball just goes out of his hands and out of bounds. I don't know. Yeah, but like, what does he do? Put lotion on us? Like, can you put the chalk that LeBron throws up in the air? Like, can we give some of that to Wiggins and to Kuminga?
It's a severe case of the yips. I mean, that's the only explanation for this, right? There's no reason that this dude is averaging. There's no logical reason anyway that he's averaging 7 points per game less than his lowest career average, right? So like his lowest points per game average before this season was 17 points per game. It was like 17.1, I think, which is ironically in the last 2 or 3 seasons, which right now we would take, right? The Warriors would take. Right now he's averaging 10.4 points per game, 15% from 3. It's just these historically tragic numbers that this reminds me of when last season people were trying to come up with a reasoning for the Warriors struggling on the road, right? When their road record was just horrendous and the complete opposite. And I remember again, there were a couple articles that came out. I think Hollinger wrote something for The Athletic. Zach Kram wrote something for us over at The Ringer that tried to really break it down by the numbers. I remember at the end of both those pieces, it was just, well, I think they just don't like each other. You know what I mean? We couldn't come up with a rational explanation. And at some point, maybe something will come out about why Wiggins is exactly struggling. But the yips is where I'm at now.
Yeah,
right? There's obviously he had to recover from that injury during the offseason, which totally understandable. But at some point now, we're 12 games in. I don't know. It's there's no other explanation than the yips. This is where I'm at now in terms of as a basketball fan who consumes this on a day-to-day basis. I'm out of answers. I'm out of potential answers anyway that make sense to any rational NBA fan.
All right. So I guess if we would have done this podcast without the fracas that happened, the lead would have been Steph Curry's knee. And originally when he heard, like, I don't even know if we heard anything coming out of the game the other day in which he heard it. And then yesterday morning, we heard that, there was something going on. And Shams wrote that it probably wasn't that big of a deal. Yep. And then we saw MRI like right after that. And maybe that was a little bit sort of like a more safe than sorry kind of thing. But they didn't have him last night. Sounds like he's going to be day to day. Kerr said there's a possibility of missing 1 or 2 games, but nothing more than that. This season, not saying that the first 12 games of the season means anything because NBA is so streaky, but they actually play well on the road this year, which is a flip from last year. And I got on this show with Brian and I said, it's great that they were winning these close games on the road. But if they come back and struggle at home, then it's all for naught. It's just like whatever. So now I don't know if you've seen the schedule. They have some home games.
Yep.
Thunder, Rockets. And the Rockets are one of the hottest teams in the NBA. So if Steph Curry misses a couple games here, we may be looking at 6-9, something like that. They need to actually go out and get a W in one of these games without him, I think, to reset the tone. And I don't know how you do that without Draymond. I mean, you got a spirited moral victory, and you can't have 2 moral victories 2 weeks in a row because we had a moral victory against Denver too. Like I'm like, okay, well, I'll give them that. They played good in Denver, but I'm sick of they played well. The Tim Kawakami article. Surprisingly, Tim Kawakami, one of not moral victory kind of dudes, he basically wrote 2 weeks in a row, that there's positives coming out of these losses. So, but I just think this season could quickly get away from them with Steph being out and Draymond being out at the same time for however long. And I wonder if that means Steph is going to try to push it because he knows that there's going to be no Draymond. So that is something that I'm keeping my eye on.
Yeah, and this wouldn't be such a big deal if Clay was playing decently, right? He's that's the bar that we're at now. If Wiggins is playing decently, I think we're fine with, okay, Draymond's going to be out, Steph can miss a game or two, and have CP kind of run that team with them. I think those are the Warriors, like you said earlier, have stacked their roster with enough guys who you can feel decently about, right, to have a chance to win the game. I mean, we're now putting all our eggs in the Brandon Pajemski basket.
Yes.
Right. And don't get me wrong, dude is fun to watch. He's also 20 years old. He's a rookie. The Timberwolves probably weren't expecting to have to guard this dude for 39 minutes last night. Right.
Yeah.
So there's just more tape on him. And I'm sure that, defenses will adjust as he plays more.
They're just going to back off and let him shoot, I think.
Which is interesting too, because he can shoot. That's actually one of his strengths. And Kerr has actually talked about that a couple of days ago, in that when someone asked him why isn't Pod shooting more, when that was kind of his bag back in college. And you actually kind of saw that yesterday, right? And a little bit in the G League when he kind of had that stint down in Santa Cruz. The dude can shoot. It looks funky because he's left-handed.
Yeah.
But he can actually really, really shoot the ball. So, I mean, again, 6-6 now, it's there's trouble ahead again if the Steph thing lingers, the Steph injury lingers, and who knows what's up with this Draymond situation. That's where a lot of this is going to be determined, right? How long he's going to be out, coupled with the Steph absence. And look, man, if this is just where Clay is in terms of his struggles and his averages and his numbers, that's equally as alarming. And again, the Wiggins situation, I guess you got to let it play out a little bit more. He's also averaging career lows in minutes, right? He's averaging 26 minutes a game. So maybe Kerr, this is a situation where it's learning to ride a bike, right? With no training wheels. You just got to let him figure it out. Or when we had to learn how to swim, right? Your parents would just throw you in the deep end until you've learned how to swim. This might just be play Wiggins 35 minutes until he figures it out, until he fixes everything he needs to fix. So we know that Kerr isn't afraid to tank a game or two or three, for the betterment of the entire season. So I could see that happening and then falling below 500 pretty quickly here.
So the one thing that Pajemski does well that I think will allow him to stay on the court, even if he's not shooting great, because I think that would be the play is you sag off, because his instinct is to drive and kick and to drive and create for guys. Like, that is just his instinct. His instinct is not to spot up and shoot, but he attacks the offensive glass. He attacks the defensive glass.
Great rebounder.
And so I think he will keep getting minutes, and maybe those things in of themselves is what could push him ahead of Moody and Kuminga in the starting. I mean, in the rotation, because what is the one thing that Kerr said last year? Because last year in the playoffs, we were all thinking like, man, why is Kuminga getting no run against this long Lakers team? And Steve Kerr's answer in the offseason was that he just doesn't rebound enough for his size. And rebounding, as we also know, is a big effort thing. So the fact that Pajemski is willing to get his nose dirty and is willing to get elbowed in the eyeball, that could push him ahead of both Moody and Kuminga in the rotation. I probably like Moody a little bit more than most, just because I think he's like a calming presence. Like he doesn't make a mistake to where you're like, oh, get that guy out. And he makes enough 3-pointers to where you're like, man, I'm so glad he was the last guy to get the ball in the rotation, because he was not hesitating to shoot it. But at the same time, he can't really go. He can go hard right, but that's about it. And then, he kind of gets stopped. And Pajemski, being a point guard, can actually handle a little bit. So he's not going to get stuck like that. So it's an interesting thing. And I do wonder if, with Draymond out, can you play large minutes with Steph GP2 and Pajemski and CP3 on that's like the smallest team of all time. But
Yeah, I
those
don't
are
think they could
also
do that.
4 of your best players. And so
Yeah. I mean, I think what we're gonna see a lot more of is little Sarge and Draymond, right? Because I think Kerr has realized what's kind of bogged down the offense, and what was again the best starting five in the league last year is no longer that, right? Because the two non-shooters aspect of that lineup has finally caught up to them, because they're not particular with that lineup, they're not particularly big. And again, when you can when the defense can decipher, oh, we're just going to sell out on Steph and sell out on Clay, and Wiggins isn't making shots, that's essentially three non-shooters, right? And that is it's just so much easier to defend. So now with them putting in Saric, I think it's an interesting wrinkle, because I think going into the season, Looney was cemented as that guy, right? Oh, he's
yeah.
there's no way he's not going to give up his spot for Chris Paul anymore. That's just not what's going to happen. But with the way that this offense is currently structured, I mean, the Saric thing, the fact that he's now the savior for a guy who signed for the vet minimum is kind of absurd. And he's the only other guy who scored 20 points multiple
But
times outside
but
of
you know
Steph,
what
which is
you know what
ridiculous.
this also means, and I don't even really mean to look further than this year. He's not coming back next year. He's gonna be way
Yeah,
too expensive.
yeah.
Oh,
He's going full Dante DiVincenzo. He's playing
y
himself out of this off the team. He's playing really
yeah,
well.
yeah. All right, so a little bit more about Kuminga and Moody, because we like these dudes. You root for these dudes. We've got to watch them from the beginning until now. But it does seem a little bit like, where's that leap? You see it in glimpses, but it's just not consistent. And I wonder what Kerr's patience level is with both of these guys, because in a game where you lose Draymond and you already don't have Steph, Moses Moody only played 13 minutes last night. You
Yeah.
would think he slides in to play 25 and that you need him because he's active and he can steal the ball. He can jump passing lanes. He could shoot the three. But for whatever reason, that was not the antidote that Kerr thought that they needed. 13 minutes. And Kuminga, he didn't even really play much down the stretch when they were really tight and they needed buckets. They're like, nope, Kuminga's not that guy who's going to get the buckets. What do you gauge by the way that Kerr played them last night? Is it just because of the game and the situation, or does this foretell a little bit of the future for them?
I mean, I think the more alarming thing is that both those guys really haven't developed the full feel for this team that you'd think they'd have by now in year three, and more so Kuminga, right? Because I think Kuminga has the higher ceiling of the two, and you expect again he was part of their whole two timeline thing, right? In terms of him being kind of the future of the team, the number 7 pick, this, that, and the third. But I think last night was just a a, a shining example of the fact that Kerr doesn't think both those guys have the feel to kind of be the solve, right? I think it's really telling that he played Pajemski, what was it, 39 minutes
Yep.
last night? Like a rookie who, for a coach who historically does not favor or play rookies, that's ridiculous. And obviously the whole situation was thrown, the whole rotation was thrown into disarray after the ejections up front. But again, like you said, 13 and 14 minutes respectively for Moody and Kuminga. It's a trust thing with Kerr. It just always has been, right? Even if you make mistakes, there's an aspect where he kind of trusts you to figure it out. He just doesn't trust those guys. And I
Mm-hmm.
think more so Kuminga than Moody, because Moody has had these moments where he's in the right spot. He's doing things. He's being that connective piece. Kuminga always feels like a round peg in a square hole type situation, right? And again, I think we all jumped to conclusions during the preseason specifically, which is just a whole other reason why we shouldn't believe anything we see in the preseason in terms of statistics like that. That dude was balling. Kuminga was
Yeah.
balling then, and now he can barely figure it out. And So it's interesting. It's alarming. It's all of these things that you hope that he figures it out, but it just might be a situation where we've kind of seen enough of a sample size in 3 years to realize, hey, maybe Kuminga just doesn't fit with this team.
Yeah.
And they kind of missed that window.
It would be interesting if he had more opportunities to maybe play a small ball five, and not defensively, you're just giving up essentially, or play a little bit more of the four in a rotation with Steph and Clay and shooters, so that he doesn't have to really be out on the perimeter. He can play a little bit closer to the basket. But they don't seem to be creative with lineups around Jonathan Kuminga, and it could be some of what you said about just the feel and the instinct, and because he like sometimes I just want him to. I've talked about this with Bry. I want to see him get the ball and immediately react instead of do the half of a second to think about what he's going to do. Because then by then the defense is already like rotated, right? Like if you have that boom, immediate, get the ball, boom, make a decision and go, then the defense is going to be on their heels. But he doesn't do that. He has to sort of figure out what he wants to do before knowing what he's going to do, except when he can cut back door for dunks, which that seems to be open a lot. And I don't know why he himself doesn't do that more. Maybe it's whatever the offense is set up for him to do is not there. But you see GP do it. You see Wiggins do it. These guys are flying back door in for dunks. And I'm just like, Kuminga's the guy who could sky the highest. Why aren't we running this play for him to take advantage of that? But some of it, I don't know. I don't know the exact reason to that. I have to watch some of the sets and stuff. It's fascinating. And this is kind of a little bit off tangent, but do you see these? Slater does it. Who's the other guy? I think he used to do the Warriors blog. Is his name Joe Verre?
Oh, Joe Verre. Yeah.
Yeah. This dude is awesome at like watching sets and getting clips and explaining the offense. Like that is like next level blogger fandom there that I really enjoy. But yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily watching for that stuff when I'm watching games. I'm trying to figure out other things, but I'm very impressed when I see stuff like that. Just like almost like, very quickly after the game is over, it's like already got stuff going. Like I shout out to him. That stuff is very impressive. But yeah, like we'll have. I mean, I don't know. I there's so many questions I think I would ask Steve about the team that are kind of unrelated to what happened in these last few games. Just like, tell us the future, bro. Like, are these guys off on your S list, or you still have ideas and thoughts, or you just give up on these guys? Are these guys the new Wisemans? Like, what's going to happen? Are we trading these dudes at the deadline for pieces?
I mean, the thing is, he's treated Moody like this his entire career, right? But then he'll throw him into a key playoff moment, and he actually kind of holds up okay. So I'm not as concerned with Moody. Again, this is what was to be expected when you draft him at 14, right? Yeah. Like he's a fringe lottery pick. The percentage of those types of guys being drafted at that number tends to not work out that high, right? I think the Kuminga ceiling is where we all are just hoping for more with him, and it just hasn't happened yet. And look, it still could. He's still very, very young. It's weird to say he's still learning this team, because again, it's year 3. The one thing that always sticks out to me is just how Andre Iguodala talks about him, or has talked about him in the past too on his podcast, in that, and I think they have a really good relationship. It seems to be that way, but you could just sense the tone in Andre's voice when he talks about the frustrations with Kuminga, right? And how they couldn't quite get him to buy in fully as a rookie. And, the same thing a little bit in year 2. Whereas when the vets talk about Moody, they talk about him a little bit more glowingly, right? And look, maybe I'm reading too much into that, admittedly, but the Kuminga thing is just, he was the piece where if he actually elevated his play, the Warriors are a much better team, right? Like they would be able to survive the Wiggins struggles right now. They'd be able to survive the Clay struggles right now, because you had, and if you look back at, when they started out 6-2, Kuminga was actually not bad off the bench, right? You could count on him for 10 to 12 points a game. He could hit that mid-range, from the free throw line, from the elbow pretty consistently. And that's just all but disappeared, right? Along with the rest of the team scoring, but it's just glaring now that they've lost 4 in a row. So
yeah,
it's a bummer.
What was the last thing I wanted to ask you about? I guess just a look ahead of the schedule, and we'll get out of here. I mentioned, I had this up somewhere. Oh, it's Thunder tomorrow, so Thursday.
Yep.
Thunder at home, and then Thunder again at home, and then the Rockets come into town. So those next 3 games, the Thunder and the Warriors games are crazy because they're so up and down. And I think if the Thunder actually had a true ball, and Shea, I guess Shea will be. Is Shea healthy? Is he going to be playing in these games?
Shea's back, and he obviously missed the first game that they had this year, that the first in-season tournament game. So
because that's what they were missing that first game against the Warriors, is they didn't really have someone,
which was Lou Dort was unbelievable in that game. He could not miss and was the best basketball player on the planet for about 25 minutes.
But those games back to back, from a size advantage, that's a horrible matchup for the Warriors size wise. The way the Warriors stay in those games is, they are a smart basketball team, and the Thunder are still young. But I'm just like, okay, Shea's just gonna dribble, get to the free throw line, boom, mid range. Who's gonna guard this dude is actually my question. So that's gonna be tough.
They'll throw Wiggins on him, as they've done, as their he's usually their first or their top line point of attack defender. So it'll be him. I think the bigger concern is who's going to guard Chet, because that dude is a freak, and he's playing well too. He's a stretch 5 who can block shots. It's not ideal for what the Warriors struggle against, is just length, consistent length. And look,
but he's going to be more willing to come out to the perimeter,
sure,
which fits better than Gobert just sitting his ass in the middle, and the Warriors can't do anything about it. But you're right, because this is the new style big with him and Wembanyama. I did the Wembanyama.
You did it.
Wembanyama. You know why I did it is because Brian and I, every time we hear it nationally, we'll just text each other. And it's like, Mike Breen
all the time.
Mike Breen did the Wembanyama. And then Dave Meltzer was talking about the Spurs as being an actual TV draw, and he did the Wembanyama. And so I have it in my head, the Wembanyama thing is in my head, but it's a Wembanyama. I don't know why people. I don't know. Maybe the N is easier than the M at this point for the tongue.
It's weird. I mean, you'd think that we'd all have it figured out, and I think that's why we've all resorted to Wemby, right?
Yeah, I think Bill Simmons, your boss, went Wemby pretty quick early in the game. He's
smart.
I'm just going Wemby. He himself he criticizes himself for not being able to pronounce names well sometimes. So going Wemby was smart. Oh, I know what the last thing I was going to ask you. You help run the Austin Reeves podcast.
Austin Rivers.
Yeah, Austin. I was. That's another one. That's the Wembanyama for me. I always say Austin Reeves. I wonder what he's going to say about this whole spiel, this whole shenanigans that happened.
I'm interested too, especially that's his former team. That was the team he played on last year. Rudy was one of his teammates last year. Jaden McDaniels, who he touted as, or he picked as the defensive player of the year this year during our prediction show. So I'm anxiously awaiting in the best way possible what he's going to say. So that should be happening. His next show drops this Friday, so I'm looking forward to it, and I actually can't wait, because I think Pasha will he's going to lead with that. They're going to lead with that topic for sure. And especially given how well the Timberwolves are playing, they should be talked about almost every show. Just they're the best defensive team in the league,
and Cat killed the Warriors last night.
Just timely bucket after timely
big
bucket.
Three after big three. It's like, Warriors. Oh, we're back. We tied the game. Cat's like, sorry guys. Boom, 3-pointer.
Yeah.
No, but I'm very interested because Austin Rivers, I think he always played his ass off against the Warriors. I don't know if there's anything personal there with because the Warriors were dominant during his early parts of his career. But I always sense that he's kind of taken this personally that the Warriors come in and win all these games. Like you could really see the frustration on his face and the fight back, and he didn't care if it was Steph or Clay. He was pushing and
He
grabbing
always
and
played well
stuff.
again the Warriors. I feel like
And
he's
that
just one of
this
these
is why
3 guys.
we
Yeah.
both wanted him on the team because we're like, man, we need some of that fire. He would have been in that mix last night if he was on the court for sure.
It would have been 1,000%. I would have loved for him to have been on the Warriors though, on the Warriors side, just to see the
Yeah.
conflict with Austin. He's getting to work with him has been fantastic in that it's one of those situations where you think someone in the NBA based off of watching them play, and you actually don't. So it's and getting to know him over the past year and change or so has been awesome, and he's he's really good at what he does with the pod stuff.
Is he gonna has his pops been on the show yet?
Not yet, but
it's coming though, right?
I think so. Doc
you can't have both of them doing stuff with the Ringer and them not getting together.
Doc showed up on Bill's show a couple of times now, so I'd like to say that Doc will be there on our show at some point, but we'll see.
That and I don't know if they could do that on this show, but I got the sense from both guys that because of Doc's career, Moms was doing the heaviest amount of raising, and I think Austin's a lot of the flack that he would get early on in his career was about, oh, of course, son of an NBA player, son of a coach, he's had it easy. And from what I understand, Austin's like, my dad wasn't coaching me, like he was working, like I had to do this thing, sort of, having the Rivers name helps, but he had to grind all on his own. And that's an interesting sort of psychoanalysis of probably why he became as good as he did.
He talks a lot about it actually he went to a public high school where he lived nearby, and he was the number 1 player in the country on that team and led them to some state championships. And he played, his AAU teams were local. He didn't do that thing now where it's you transfer to a certain high school to play to get you to a certain place, right? So it's interesting that so actually Austin actually has his own AAU team over there in Florida now, and he talks about some of the struggles that he has to deal with like kind of like the parents and how they get almost too involved, and he just didn't have, I guess, that obstacle, and just that he played. He played with the guys that went to that high school, to his high school, and the guys that were local in their AAU, on their AAU team. So it's I'm interested to see. He talks a lot about kind of the high school aspect of this all, and as like the Cooper Flags of the world, as he watches them develop, he's always got interesting takes, which I'm always looking forward to hearing him talk about.
Well, I know Austin's got his own feed now. The Off Guard feed. So if I remember, I'll link to the Apple Podcast feed in the notes to this show. But I just find the whole thing really fascinating. He was a guy who was easy to kind of dislike because of how well he played against the Warriors. But I do like his perspective. Like when he came on with Bill that one time, like I was like, yeah, this guy's got a lot to say, which is awesome. So
yeah.
All right. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate you coming in the clutch because Brian's out for the rest of the week. We were able to make it work on our lunch breaks. So much love, and gonna hope that things shape up for the Warriors here for our own fandom.
Absolutely. Double G, thanks as always for having me on. I'll come on anytime. So shout out to you guys. Shout out to Brian. Good luck with the move, and we'll wait with bated breath on this Draymond suspension.
All right. For Ben, I'm Double G. See you when we see you. Peace out.